A very good morning to you, South Africa, and those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is The Agenda. It's Sunday, the 8th of September, 2019. Thank you, as always, for joining us. The first hour of The Agenda starts right now. The story leads. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari will visit South Africa next month. The state visit follows a tax on foreign-owned businesses in this country and a tax on South African businesses based in Nigeria. Now, the presidency says the visit is aimed at reinforcing what the media statement calls the strong bonds between the two countries. This follows President Cyril Ramaphosa's talks on Friday with Nigerian Ambassador Ahmed Abu-bakar. Now, the presidency added that President Buhari had conveyed his commitment to the values and prosperity and the advancement of Africa that has shared by South Africa as well as Nigeria. Now, the Nigerian government has undertaken to act against lawlessness and the targeting of South African assets in Nigeria. Look, this is an important story, no doubt, and we want to dig a little deeper into President Buhari's state visit next month. Khusela Diko, spokesperson to President Cyril Ramaphosa, joins us on the line. Ms. Diko, thank you very much indeed, as always, for your time. So, President Ramaphosa reaffirmed South Africa-Nigeria relations as being firm and strong. But let me ask you, has it been strained of late following the recent incidents in parts of this country as well as subsequently in Nigeria?
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to the viewers. We're very happy that you invited us on the show. We appreciate that. Relations between South Africa and Nigeria, as you say, they are very strong relationships. They are relationships that take into account shared history. They take into account the strides that we've been making from a political, economic, trade, as well as social relations between our people. It's a moot point to make the fact that Nigeria and our sister countries on the continent would be concerned about the recent spate of violence that we have seen in South Africa, a lot of which is targeting African nationals or nationals from other parts of the African continent. And these are matters that not only the president of Nigeria would have raised, but they are concerns that are shared by Africans on the continent at large. We do not understand this to mean a straining of relationships, but rather an opportunity for South Africa as well as Nigeria and other countries on the continent to really seek to deepen and broaden our people-to-people relations, but also to look at the root causes of some of these challenges. Yeah. As the South African government, we do not undermine the very real grievances that the South African people would have, issues of poverty, of unemployment, perceptions that arise nationals from other countries who perhaps are reaping opportunities that South Africa feel they should be. Yeah. We have a problem of crime, and we do think that, and we accept the reasoning that says the influx of undocumented and thus illegal migrants in this country could perhaps be fueling some of those challenges. So what the president called for in the meeting with Special Envoy Ambassador Abu-bakar was a more deeper introspection into these root causes and how do we, as various countries, because South Africa can't resolve these challenges alone, so how do we bring our sister countries for us to identify these problems and look for lasting solutions in that regard?
Look, I want to get where the president's head is on some of the issues, and you've mentioned some of the grievances as well. There are many hardworking foreign nationals in this country, you would agree, who are making a positive contribution. They are seen as an essential part of the fabric of this country. But through reporting, we often hear people in some communities complaining that some foreign nationals who are here in this country illegally are allegedly involved in criminal activity. How is the president approaching these concerns?
Maybe to start with, to say that a lot of nationals from other countries that are in South Africa are playing a very positive role. Not only are they playing a positive role, but the South African government is on a drive to even get more highly skilled foreign nationals in the country to assist us as it relates to the challenges that we confront in our economy. A lot of the countries around the world, whether you go to the US, to the UK, at the bedrock of their skills base, you would have a lot of skilled nationals and South Africans in some of those countries. What the president has said we need to do, firstly, is to accept that there are problems and we must not shy away from that. And if those problems relate to our porous borders, we need to ensure that we are able to tighten those up, led by Home Affairs. The Minister of Home Affairs recently met with the ministers of Home Affairs of the countries of Mozambique, of Lesotho, of Eswatini, where they were looking really at some of those issues. But he's also said we must be able to isolate those who are here illegally. And you'll know that between January and June of 2019, more than 10,000 undocumented migrants were deported back to their countries of origin. But we also need to ensure that our systems as government are integrated. So how do you bring in the South African Police Services, Home Affairs, and so forth, where you are able to track those migrants who come into the country illegally? We're able to document them like you do with South African nationals. So you know who is in this country and how it allows us to manage the issues. But, in referring back to the meeting that the president had with the special envoy of His Excellency President Buhari, at the core of it is that South Africa and Nigeria remain committed to working together to ensure that we realize this vision of an Africa that is at peace with itself and at peace with others. And it really begins by us seeking to strengthen our people-to-people relations, strengthening our economic ties, because our fortunes are interrelated as a continent, and there's no way we can continue to allow lawlessness, which begins to undermine that. President Ramaphosa was particularly heartened by the commitment that was made by the Nigerians that as South Africa continues to try to protect those foreign nationals who are here in our country as well as their property, Nigeria would also not tolerate any undermining of their state authority, but it would ensure that South African citizens and South African assets in their countries are protected as well.
You would agree that finding a plausible, practical, realistic solutions to this problem is key, but it is complex. Look, we know that police and government at large are calling largely the acts that we've seen criminality, but there are deeper underlying issues, as you outlined as well. So from the interactions that the president had with the Nigerian ambassador, are you getting a strong sense? Does Nigeria stand ready to assist South Africa in establishing the root causes and, I guess, developing the sustainable solutions to the challenges concerned?
Even to the extent that you asked that question, I can assure South Africans that the presidents of South Africa and the presidents of Nigeria have committed themselves and their governments to work together to ensure that we end this scourge. While we are speaking about it in the context of xenophobic attacks, it's also important that we make the point that at the core of it, some of the people who are getting the most hurt in these incidences are South Africans. If you look at the events over the last week or so, while one death is too many, regardless of what nationality the person is, but in the 11 deaths recorded in Gauteng, almost 9 of them were South African citizens. So the point that we're making is that criminality is criminality, and regardless of who perpetrated against whom it is directed, the state must ensure that the full might of the law is used in those incidences. For their parts, the two presidents have agreed that President Buhari will be undertaking a state visit to South Africa in October of this year at a mutually beneficial and a mutually agreed date. During that visit, President Buhari obviously seeks to begin and strengthen these conversations that we're having, that how do we deal with the challenges. It is not only the Republic of Nigeria, Federal Republic of Nigeria that is affected, but there's countries across the continent. But South Africa and Nigeria, as the powerhouses on the continent, have a responsibility to ensure that they lead in this fight against the scourge. And it's for that reason that President Ramaphosa looks forward to hosting President Buhari in October.
Ms. Diko, I heard you saying xenophobic attacks. Are we comfortable to say it, that these are xenophobic attacks or criminality or a bit of both? Where are we at this stage in terms of labeling what we see on the streets?
Even we don't want to pick hairs. we don't want to pick heads and call it one thing or the other. The fact of the matter is you have a situation where you have seen public disorder, you have seen violence, and obviously the police in dealing with those matters would arrest people, for damage to property, because we have no crime in South Africa that is called xenophobia. You may find that as South Africans, we had once started a discussion on criminalizing other forms of intolerance, and if needs be, perhaps we may want to have a discussion on criminalizing this one as a form of intolerance. But at this point, we do know that while you have seen these criminal attacks happening, whether they are directed solely at foreign-owned businesses or even, as we have seen in the recent weeks, against South African-owned businesses, it is criminality. What we are not going to shy away from is that there is an element that exists in them where there does seem to be a targeting of foreign-owned businesses or people of foreign origin. Now, what we're saying is that must be dealt with. And whether we then want to characterize it as one thing or the other, for us is neither. They must be stopped, and those who are responsible for breaking the law must be dealt with in the harshest manner possible.
Yeah. Reportedly, a couple of days ago, Tanzania's national carrier suspended its flights from its commercial capital to Johannesburg, citing the violence that was, they say, a risk to its passengers. Will the president be engaging with other heads of state who are concerned about the situation here in South Africa?
Well, the South African government, through its missions and led by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, has been in contact with a number of country representatives throughout the continent. We must say that it is obviously very concerning when you would have, for example, countries such as the Republic of Botswana issuing travel advisories to their citizens traveling to South Africa, the incident that you referred to with the Tanzanians. But even you have a situation where some amongst us, or even in neighboring countries and on the continent, would continue to peddle fake stories, fake news, fake videos that have absolutely nothing to do with what is happening in South Africa. And then you begin to feel, confusion, paranoia, panic across the country and across the continent in terms of what is happening in South Africa.
Yeah.
So while our challenges here are real and we are continuing to engage with our neighboring countries, we do caution and want to urge South Africans in particular not to engage in such acts and to desist from sending material which is inflammatory, which is emotive and provocative, because all it does is to put the lives of others, especially South Africans who are outside the border of this country, in risk. We would have a situation where last week, the Minister of International Relations was forced to approve the temporary closure of our high commissions in Abuja and in Lagos in Nigeria. Yeah. Now, these are concerning, but they're being fueled, by us also spreading fake news throughout the continent.
Yeah, I think you make a very important point, and here at the SABC News, you try your best in order to call out some of this misinformation that is being peddled out there, because it has that potential of fueling tensions in the respective communities. Khusela Diko, as always, a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for your perspective.